Continuing our read aloud, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Even though we're on spring break, don't want to lose our pace and keep going and find out what's going to happen next. We're on chapter 13, page 111. Mr. Ward was at the front of the classroom reading out a passage from their Russian history textbook. He swiped something from the board and Pip watched as a crack of sunlight climbed up the back of his bright shirt. She waited. When the bell finally rang for lunch, Mr. Ward called over the scraping chairs. "Read chapter 3 before next class, and if you want to get ahead, Trotsky on over to chapter 4 as well." He chuckled at his own joke. "You coming, Pip?" Connor said, swinging his backpack onto one shoulder. Yeah, I'll come find you guys in a minute," she said. "I need to ask Mr. Ward something first." "You need to ask Mr. Ward something, huh?" Mr. Ward had overheard. "That's ominous. I hope you haven't started thinking about the coursework already." "No, well, yes, I have," Pip said, "but that's not what I want to ask you." She waited until they were the only two left in the classroom. "What is it?" Mr. Ward glanced down at his watch. "You have 10 of my minutes before I start panicking about the panini queue." "Yeah, sorry," Pip said, grasping inside for her courage. Everything okay?" Mr. Ward asked, sitting back on his desk, arms and legs crossed. "Worrying about your application. I don't think you need to worry. I've already started on your letter of recommendation and... No, thanks, but it's not that." She took a breath and blew out her top lip. When I interviewed you before, you said you didn't have anything to do with Andy in the last 2 years of school." "Yes, correct," he blinked. "She wasn't in any of my classes after sophomore year." "Okay, but..." Her courage returned all at once and her words raced each other out. "One of Andy's friends said that, excuse the language, Andy referred to you as an asshole and other unsavory words sometime in the weeks before she went missing." The "why" was hiding there beneath her words. She didn't need to say it. "Oh?" Mr. Ward said, rubbing the dark hair back from his face. He looked at her and sighed. "Well, I was hoping this wouldn't come up. I don't see what good it can do to dwell on it now, but I can see you're being very thorough with your project." Pip nodded, her silence beckoning an answer. Mr. Ward shifted. "I don't feel too comfortable about it, saying unpleasant things about a student who has lost her life." He glanced up at the classroom door and scooted over to shut it. "I didn't have much to do with Andy at school, but as Naomi's dad, I knew her, of course. And it was in that capacity, through Naomi, that I learned some things about Andy." "Yes?" "No easy way of saying it, but she was a bully. She was bullying another girl in their grade. I can't remember her name now. There was some sort of incident, a video that Andy had posted online." Pip was both surprised and not really at all. Yet another secret in Andy Bell's life. "I knew enough to understand that Andy would be in trouble with both the school and the police for what she'd done," Mr. Ward continued. "And I thought it was a shame because it was the first week back after spring break and exams were coming up." He sighed again. "What I should have done when I found out was tell the principal about the incident, but the school has a no-tolerance policy on bullying, and I knew Andy would be expelled immediately. I just couldn't do it. Even though she was a bully, I couldn't live with myself knowing I'd play a part in ruining a student's life." "So what did you do?" Pip asked. "I looked up her father's contact details and I called him, the first day of school after the break." "You mean the Monday of the week Andy disappeared?" Mr. Ward nodded. "Yes, I guess it was. I called Jason Bell and I told him everything I'd learned and said that he needed to have a very serious talk with his daughter about bullying and consequences, and I suggested restricting her online access. I said I was trusting him to sort it out. Otherwise, I would have no choice but to inform the school and have Andy expelled." "And what did he say?" "Well, he was thankful that I was giving his daughter a second chance she possibly didn't deserve, and he promised he would talk to her. I'm guessing now that when Jason did speak to Andy, he mentioned that I was the source of the information. So if I was the target of some choice words from Andy that week, I'm not entirely surprised. I must say, disappointed is all. Pip sighed with undisguised relief. What's that for? I'm just glad you weren't lying for a worse reason. Think you've read too many mystery novels, Pip. Why not some historical biographies instead? He smiled gently. They can be just as disturbing, she paused. You never told anyone before, had you? About Andy's bullying? Of course not. It seemed pointless. After everything happened, insensitive too. He scratched his chin. I try not to think about it because I get lost in butterfly effect theories. What if I had just told the school and Andy was expelled that week? Would it have changed the outcome? Would the conditions that led to Sal killing her not have been in place? Would those two still be alive? I understand, Pip said. And you don't remember the girl Andy bullied? No, sorry, he said. Naomi would remember. You could ask her about it. Not sure what this has to do with the use of media in criminal investigations, though. He raised his eyebrows in a scolding way. Well, I haven't decided on my final title yet. Okay, well, don't go falling down a rabbit hole, he smiled, wagged his finger, and now I'm running away from you because I'm desperate for a tuna melt. He dashed into the corridor, and Pip felt lighter watching him go. That wasn't as hard as she thought it would be, and now she had some answers. Another real lead to follow, and one less name on her list. But the lead was taking her back to Naomi, and Pip would have to look her in the eyes again, like she didn't think there was something secret hiding there. Pippa Fitz Amobi, 9/12/19. Capstone Project Log Entry 5. Transcript of second interview with Naomi Ward. Pip. Okay, recording. Your dad told me that he found out Andy was bullying another girl in your year, cyberbullying. He thought this was some online video involved. Do you know anything about this? Naomi. Yeah, like I said, I thought Andy was bad news. Pip. Can you tell me more about it? Naomi. There was this girl in our grade, Natalie Silva, and she was pretty and blonde too. They looked quite similar, actually, and I guess Andy felt threatened by her because at the start of our senior year, Andy started spreading rumors about her and finding ways to humiliate her. Pip. If Sal and Andy didn't start seeing each other until that December, how did you know all this? Naomi. I was friends with Nat. We had biology together. Pip. Oh, what kind of rumors was Andy starting? Naomi. The kind of disgusting things only a teenage girl could think up. Things like her family was incestuous, that Nat watched people undressed in the changing rooms and touched herself. Those kinds of things. Pip. You think Andy did that because Nat was pretty and she felt threatened by her? Naomi. I actually think that was the extent of her thought process. Andy wanted to be the girl everyone wanted. Nat was competition, so Andy had to take her down. Pip. Did you know about this video at the time? Naomi. Yeah, it got shared all over social media. It wasn't taken down until a few days later when someone reported it. Pip. When was this? Naomi. It was during spring break. So, what was the video? Naomi. As far as I know, Andy had been hanging out with some friends from school, including her two minions. Pip. Chloe Birch and Emma Hunton? Naomi. Yeah, and some other kids, not Sal or Nat or any of us. And there was this guy, Chris Parks, who everyone knew Nat liked. I don't know all the details, but Andy either used his phone or told him what to do, and they were sending flirty texts to Nat. And Nat was responding because she liked Chris and thought it was him, and then Andy/Chris asked Nat to send a video of her topless with her face in it, so he'd know it was really her. Pip. And Nat did it? Naomi. Yeah, a little naive, but she thought she was talking to just Chris. The next thing we all knew, the video was online and Andy and loads of other people were sharing it. The comments were so horrible, and practically everyone at school saw it before it got taken down. Nat was inconsolable. She even skipped the first 2 days back at school after break because she was so humiliated. Pip. Did Sal know Andy was behind it? Naomi. Well, I mentioned it to him. He didn't approve, obviously, but he just said, it's Andy's drama. I don't want to get involved. Sal was just too laid back about some things. Pip. Was there anything else that happened between Nat and Andy? Naomi. Yeah, actually, I might have been the only one Nat told because she was crying in biology right after it happened. Pip. What? Naomi. During the fall semester, the school was putting on a play, The Crucible. I think Nat got the main part. Apparently, Andy had wanted it, and she was really pissed off. So after the parts were posted, Andy cornered Nat, and she told her, Pip. Yes? Naomi. Sorry, I forgot to mention some context. Nat's brother, Daniel, who was like 5 years older than us, he'd worked at the school part-time as a janitor when we were like 15 or 16, only for a year, while he was looking for other jobs. Pip. Okay. Naomi. Okay, so Andy cornered Nat and told her that when Daniel was still working at the school, he had sex with Andy, even though she was only 15 at the time. Andy told Nat to drop out of the play or she'd go to the police and say she was statutorily raped by Nat's brother. So Nat dropped out because she was scared of what Andy would do. Pip. Was it true? Did Andy have a relationship with Nat's brother? Naomi. I don't know. Nat didn't know for sure either. That's why she dropped out of the play, but I don't think she ever asked him. Pip. Do you know where Nat is now? Do you think I could talk to her? Naomi. I'm not really in contact with her, but I know she's back at home with her parents. I heard some stuff about her, though. Pip. What stuff? Naomi. I think in college she was involved in some kind of fight. She got arrested and charged with assault, and I think she spent some time in prison. Pip. Oh, God. Naomi. I know. Pip. Can you give me her number? Chapter 14. Did you get all dressed up to come and see me, Sarge? Ravi said, leaning against his front door frame in a green plaid flannel shirt and jeans. Well, Pip had put on her nice jacket today. Not that she was going to tell him that. Nope, I came straight from school. But he was still smiling, eyes glinting like he knew something she didn't. If anything, I had dressed down, Pip added. Ah, I see, he said, a plainclothes officer today. Exactly, she said. Speaking of, you're coming with me. Put on some shoes. She clapped her hands. Are we going on a mission? Ravi asked, falling back to slip on some old sneakers discarded in the hallway. Do I need to bring my night vision goggles and my utility belt? Nope, not this time, she smiled, starting down the garden path as Ravi closed the front door, then followed her. Where are we going? To a house where 2 potential Andy killer suspects grew up, Pip said. One of them just out of prison for aggravated assault. You're my backup, since we're going to speak to a potentially violent person of interest. Backup? He said, catching up to walking alongside her. You know, Pip said casually, so there's someone there to hear my screams for help. Oh, wait, Pip. He closed his fingers around her arm and pulled them both to a stop. I don't want you doing something that's actually dangerous. Sal wouldn't have wanted that either. Oh, come on. She shrugged him off. Nothing gets between me and my homework, not even a little danger. He looked unconvinced. I'm kidding. I'm just going to, very calmly, ask her a few questions. Oh, it's a her? Ravi said. Oh, okay then. Pip swung her backpack and whacked him on the elbow. Hey, she said, women can be just as dangerous as men. Ouch, tell me about it, he said, rubbing his arm. What have you got in there, bricks? It sounds like Andy was a piece of work, Ravi said in the car when Pip was done catching up on everything she'd learned since they last spoke. Everything except the dark figure in the forest and the note in her sleeping bag. This investigation meant everything to him, but she knew he would tell her to stop if he thought she was putting herself in danger. She couldn't let that happen. And yet, he carried on, it was so easy for everyone to believe Sal was the monster. Whoa, so deep. He turned to her. You can quote me on that in your project. Of course, footnote and everything, she said. Ravi Singh, he said, drawing his words with his fingers. Deep, unfiltered thoughts. Pip's bug-faced car, 2019. Yes, she glanced quickly at him. Except you didn't use proper referencing style. Oh, the shame. He pretended to wince. The mechanical voice on her phone's GPS interrupted, announcing they'd reached their destination. Must be this one, Pip said. Naomi told me it was the one with the blue door. She pulled over to the curb. I called Natalie twice yesterday. The first time, she hung up after I said the words school project. The second time, she wouldn't pick up at all. Let's hope she actually opened the door. You coming? I'm not sure, he said, pointing at his own face. There's that whole murderer's brother thing. You might get more answers if I'm not there. Oh? How about I stand on the path there? He gestured to the slabs of concrete that ran through the yard toward the house to the point where they turned sharply left to lead to the front door. She won't see me, but I'll be right there, ready for action. They stepped out of the car, and Ravi handed over her backpack with an exaggerated grunt. She nodded at him when he was in position and then strolled up to the front door. She prodded the bell twice, fiddling nervously with the hem of her jacket as a shadowy figure emerged behind the frosted glass. The door opened slowly and a face appeared in the crack, a young woman with a white blonde hair cropped closely to her head and eyeliner ringed thickly around her eyes. Beneath the makeup, she looked eerily like Andy. Similar big blue eyes and plump pale lips. Hi, Pip said. Are you Nat de Silva? Yes, she said hesitantly. My name's Pip. She swallowed. I was the one who called you yesterday. I'm friends with Naomi Ward. You knew her at school, right? Yeah. Naomi was a friend. Why, is she okay? Nat looked concerned. Oh, she's fine, Pip smiled. She's back at home at the moment. I didn't know she was back. Nat opened the door a little wider. Yeah, I should catch up with her sometime. So, sorry for showing up like this, Pip said. She looked down at full-length Natalie, noticing the electronic tag buckled around her ankle. So as I said when I called, I'm doing a school project, and I was wondering if I could ask you some questions. She looked back quickly, up at Nat's face. What about? Nat shifted, the tagged foot behind the door. It's about Andy Bell. No thanks. Nat stepped back to shut the door, but Pip blocked it with her foot. Please, I know the awful things she did to you, she said. I can understand why you wouldn't want to, but that bitch ruined my life, Nat spat. I'm not wasting one more breath on her. Move! That's when they both heard the sound of rubber skidding across concrete and a whispered, oh, crap. Nat glanced up and her eyes widened. You, she said quietly. You're Sal's brother. It wasn't a question. Pip turned now, her eyes falling on Ravi behind her, standing sheepishly next to the uneven slab he must have tripped over. Hi, he said, ducking his head and raising his hand. I'm Ravi. He came to a stand beside Pip, and Nat's grip on the door loosened. She let it swing open. Sal was always nice to me, she said, even when he didn't have to be. The last time I spoke to him, he was offering to give up his lunch breaks to tutor me in Gov because I was struggling. I'm sorry you don't have your brother anymore. Thank you, Ravi said. It must be hard for you too, Nat carried on, her eyes still lost in another world. How much this town worships Andy Bell, Fairview's saint and sweetheart. The bench dedicated in the park, taken too soon, not soon enough, it should say. She wasn't a saint, Pip said gently, trying to coax Nat out from behind the door, but Nat wasn't looking at her, only at Ravi. He stepped up. She bullied you? Sure did. Nat laughed bitterly. And she's still ruining my life, even from the grave. You've checked out my hardware. She pointed to her ankle monitor. Got this because I punched one of my suite mates in college. We were deciding on bedrooms, and this girl started pulling a stunt, exactly like Andy would have, and I just lost it. We know about the video she put up of you, Pip said. She should have faced charges over it. You were still a minor at the time. Nat shrugged. At least she was punished in some way that week. Some divine providence, thanks to Sal. Did you want her dead, or after what she'd done to you, Ravi asked. Of course I did, Nat said darkly. Of course I wanted her gone. I skipped 2 days of school because I was so upset, and when I went back on the Wednesday, everyone was looking at me, laughing at me. I was crying in the corridor, and Andy walked by and called me a slut. I was so angry that I left her a nice little note in her locker. I was too scared to ever say anything to her face, though. Pip glanced sideways at Robbie, at his tensed jaw and furrowed brow, and she knew he'd pick up on it, too. A note? He said. Was it a threatening note? No shit, Nat laughed. You stupid bitch, I'm gonna kill you, something like that. Sal got there first, though. Maybe he didn't, Pip said. Nat turned and looked Pip in the face. Then she burst into loud and forced laughter, a mist of spit landing on Pip's cheek. Oh, that is too good, she hooted. Are you asking me whether I killed Andy Bell? I had the motive, right? That's what you're thinking. You want my fucking alibi? She laughed cruelly. Pip didn't say anything. Her mouth was filling uncomfortably with saliva, but she didn't swallow. She didn't want to move at all. She felt Robbie brushing against her shoulder, his hand skimming just past hers, disturbing the air around it. Nat leaned toward them. I didn't have any friends left because of Andy Bell. I had no place to be on that Friday night. I was home playing Scrabble with my parents and sister-in-law, tucked in by 11. Sorry to disappoint you. He's a suspect too, is he? Her voice darkened. Naomi must have been talking then. He was out drinking with his cop friends that night. He's a police officer, Robbie said. Just finished his training that year, so yeah, no murderers in the house, I'm afraid. Now fuck off and tell Naomi to fuck off too. Nat stepped back and kicked the door shut in their faces. Pip watched the door vibrating in its frame, her eyes so transfixed that it looked for a moment like the very particles of air were rippling. She shook her head and turned to Robbie. Let's go, he said softly. Back in the car, Pip allowed herself to just breathe for a few seconds to arrange the haze of her thoughts into actual words. Robbie found his first. Am I in trouble for, literally tripping into the interrogation? I heard raised voices and... No. Pip looked at him and couldn't help but smile. We're lucky you did. She only talked because you were there. He sat up a little straighter in his seat and his hair brushed against the roof of the car. So the death threat that journalist told you about came from Nat, Pip finished. Turning a key in the ignition, she pulled out and drove about 20 feet up the road, out of sight of the De Silva house before stopping again and reaching for her phone. What are you doing? Nat said her brother is a police officer. She thumbed on to the browser app. Let's look him up. It came up on the first page of results, Daniel De Silva's LinkedIn profile. It said he was an officer at the Fairview Police Department, had been so since the end of 2013. Hey, I know him, Robbie said, leaning over her shoulder. You do? Yeah, back when I started asking questions about Sal, he was the officer that told me to give it up. That my brother was guilty beyond doubt. He does not like me. Robbie's hand crept up the back of his head, losing his fingers in his dark hair. Last summer, I was sitting at a table outside the cafe by the library. This guy, he gestured to the photo, made me move along, said I was loitering. Funny, he didn't think anyone else was loitering, just the brown kid with a murderer for a brother. What an asshole, she said. And he shut down all your questions about Sal? Robbie nodded. He's been a police officer in Fairview since just before Andy disappeared. Pip stared down at her phone into Daniel's smiling face. Robbie, if someone did frame Sal and make his death look like suicide, wouldn't it be easier for someone with knowledge of police procedure? That it would, Sarge, he said. And there's the rumor Andy slept with him when he was 15, which he used to blackmail Nat out of the play. Yes, and what if they started up again later after Daniel was married and Andy was a senior? He could be the secret older guy. What about Nat, he said. I sort of want to believe her when she says she was home with her parents that night because she'd lost all of her friends. But she's also proven to be violent. He weighed up his hands in a conceptual seesaw, and there's obviously motive, maybe a brother and sister killer team? Or a Nat and Naomi killer tag team, Pip groaned. She did seem pretty angry that Naomi had talked to you. Robbie agreed. What's the word count on this project, Pip? Not enough, Robbie. Not nearly enough. So we should just go and get ice cream and give our brains a rest? He turned to her with a smile, that smile of his. Pip was supposed to go over to Lauren's house later, but she could be a little late, just a little bit. Yes, we probably should, as long as you're a cookie dough kind of gal. Quote, Ravi Singh. He said dramatically into an invisible microphone, a thesis on the best ice cream flavor. Pip's car, September. Shut up. Oh, okay. Pippa Fitzamobi, 9/14/19. Capstone Project Log, Entry 17. I can't find anything on Daniel De Silva. There's hardly anything to learn from his Facebook profile other than he got married in September 2013 and he really likes barbecues. There's nothing about his professional life online either. Only an article written by Stanley Forbes 3 years ago about a car collision on Hillside that Daniel responded to. But if he was the secret older guy, Andy would have ruined him in 2 different ways. She could have told his new wife he was cheating and destroyed his marriage, or she could have filed a police report about statutory rape from 2 years before. Both circumstances are just rumor at this point, but if true, they certainly would give Daniel a motive for wanting her dead. Andy could have blackmailed him. It's definitely not out of character for her to have been blackmailing a De Silva. If Daniel is our killer, he might have disturbed the investigation somehow in his capacity as a police officer. A man on the inside. Perhaps when searching the Bell residence, he could have stolen or tampered with any evidence that would lead him back to him or his sister. It's also worth noting the way he reacted to Ravi asking questions about Sal. Did he shut Ravi down to protect himself? I've looked through all the reports on Andy's disappearance again, staring at pictures of the police searches until it feels like my eyes are about to climb out of their sockets. I found one photo that could be De Silva taking on the Sunday morning. There's an officer walking through Andy's front door, his back annoyingly to the camera, but his hair color and length matched De Silva's when I cross-referenced social media posts from around that time. It could be him. On to the list he goes. Persons of interest: Jason Bell, Naomi Ward, secret older guy, Nat De Silva, Daniel De Silva. On Tuesday, we'll start on page 129 in The Good Girl's Guide to Murder.